There's a story about four guys who are brought into a room. There's going to be an experiment. And they're told they're going to be blindfolded, and they're all going to have the same thing in front of them. And just by feeling it, just by using their hands, they have to explain and guess what this thing is. So all four guys are blindfolded. They're all in there, and they say, okay, go. So the first guy says, okay, the thing in front of me, it's big. It's kind of like a wall, I think is what this is. Second guy says, no, you're definitely wrong. It's not big like a wall. It's like round, and it's like a tree trunk. That's what it is. It's a tree trunk. Third guy says, you're both wrong. It's not like either of those things. It's like a fire hose. It's what it feels like. Fourth and final guy says, everyone, you're all wrong. It is a rope. It's just a rope. That's what's in front of us. They're all feeling the same thing. They all have very different views of what that thing is. The person who's moderating this, that fifth person, he says, actually, what you're all feeling is an elephant. That's right. The person who thought it was a wall was feeling the side of the elephant. The person who thought it was like a tree trunk was feeling a leg of the elephant. The person who thought it was a hose was feeling the trunk, and the rope, it was a tail. The idea is our perspective. We all, you, I, we all only see a sliver of what reality is. God is the one who can actually see the full picture. Now, that being the case, since God is the only one who can fully see the picture, it makes sense that we should trust him. So what we're going to talk about this time around is as we go further on in our faith, we need to go further on with trust. We need to trust God. We're going to be in Philippians 4. You're going to do verses 8 through 13. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Basically, be careful what you think about. Be careful what you fill your mind with. And you might think, well, it doesn't really matter what I think about, what's in my mind, right? No, it does matter. As we've talked about several times, what we think affects how we feel. And how we feel affects how we act. This is why Paul says in 2 Corinthians 10:5 that we need to take captive every thought to obey Christ. We talked last time about the peace of Jesus. If you want the peace of Jesus in your heart, then it has to start in your mind. That's where we have to start this. We can't fill our things with things that are contrary to Jesus and expect to have his peace in our lives. It just doesn't make any sense. We can't do something that isn't going to get the results that we want and expect to get those results. Like, for example, have you ever heard the idea that eating carrots helps your vision? You ever hear that? That, like, as a kid, I remember my parents always saying, you got to eat carrots. Why? It's good for your eyes. And not only good for your eyes, but they actually would say that it's good for your night vision. It'll help you see better at night if you eat carrots. Sorry, guys. It's not true. Not true. This is actually something that goes back to World War II. This was a little bit of propaganda they had back then. You see, during World War II, this is the 1940s, keep in mind, during this time, radar was a new thing. And the British developed a radar they could use. So their Air Force was using this radar that allowed them to know when the German planes were there before they could see them with their eyes. Now, they didn't want to give away this secret. So they made up this propaganda piece saying, what we do, we just give our pilots so many carrots. They just eat carrots and carrots and carrots and carrots. That's how they can see so good at night. That's what it is, really. And even today, this is kind of carried on. But it's not true. They had radar. That's how they could see so good at night. It wasn't them actually seeing. It was using radar. So today, you could eat all the carrots you want. You could be doing that so-called right thing. But you're not going to get those results. You're not going to be able to see better at night if that's what you're going for. When it comes to our faith, we can do all the right things on the outside. We can go to church, go to youth group, serve, do all these things. We can do the right things, but it has to be more than just that. If we're not actually doing it for the right reasons, if there's not the right mindset, we're not going to get the desired results. We're not going to get the peace of Jesus if we're just doing those actions. So we have to fill our minds with the right things. So what do we fill our minds with? Well, look at the verse. He says right there. It says, whatever is true. That's literally, whatever is the opposite of false. And again, this isn't like my truth or your truth. This is the truth. God, what he says is true. Whatever is honorable, that's just whatever is worthy of respect. Those are the things that God says are respectable. Whatever is just, that's like whatever is right or upright. These are the things that are in line with what God calls good. Whatever is pure, that's just being free from contamination. The Bible says we should not even have a hint. It's not like, well, it's just a little bit of wrong thoughts that I have. No, don't have any of them. We need to be free from contamination. Whatever is lovely, that just means beautiful or attractive. Things that God says are lovely. Basically, if someone could see your thoughts, would they say your thoughts are lovely? Would they say your thoughts are beautiful or attractive? Whatever is commendable, those are things that we admire. Things that God says we should admire. He says if there is any excellence, that's the highest standard, not mediocrity, not just a low standard, the highest standard in a moral sense, God's standard. And then finally, if there's anything worthy of praise, anything that God says is worthy of praise. See here, if we're going to take all of that and just sum it up, our first point would be that we need to trust God to define what's good. We have to trust God to say what is good. You might have your own definition, I might have my own definition, but really we need an outside source to tell us what's good. It can't just be up to us. If we go all the way back to the beginning, Adam and Eve, we have creation, God does all this stuff, then we get to page 3, Adam and Eve, everything gets messed up, right? Chapter 3. Why? Because God says you can eat from this tree, but not this one. This tree is the knowledge of good and evil. I will tell you what is good. I will tell you what is evil. And Adam and Eve wanted to decide for themselves what was good and what was evil. So they ate from that tree. We don't want to have this standard where we all just say what is good on our own way. Let me give you an example. There are some things we can do this with, right? Okay, so play along in the room there. Actually, raise your hand when I say this. It'll be fun. Maybe. Okay, so who likes things that are sour? Right? Anyone? You can raise your hand. Come on. Yeah, I do. I like things to a degree, kind of. What about things that are spicy? Yes. I think my favorite food might be hot wings. That's like one of my favorite things. Absolutely. What about, is there anyone who prefers like more savory things over sweet? So maybe you're not really into desserts. You kind of like the savory side of things a little bit more. Anybody there? Yeah, maybe? Okay. What about this? Let's, on the count of 3, just say what your favorite soda is. Even if you don't have one, just say none. So what's your favorite soda? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yeah, okay. So here's the thing. We all have different ideas of what's good there, right? And that's okay. That kind of difference, that's fine. But when it comes to morality, when it comes to what's good and evil, we don't want different standards. Now you might say, no, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with different standards. Okay, so let's say hypothetically someone says that if they want something bad enough, they should be allowed to take it. They should be allowed to steal. And you're like, well, that's fine. They can believe that. You'll think that's fine until they come to you and want to steal something you have. Then at that point, you want there to be an objective truth. You want there to be a standard that they have to follow. You don't want them to steal from you. See, when it comes to good and evil, we need a standard outside of ourselves. Look at verse 9 now. It says, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. So what he's saying is we have to have the right mindset, but that's not enough. We also have to act on it. We have to put it in action. It's not enough just to say you believe these things. You have to actually do what these things say, and that proves that you actually do believe them. This is why it says in James 1:22, be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Right now, you are all hearing me talk about the word of God. Good job. That's not enough. If you think that's enough, it says you're only deceiving yourself. Our second point is that we have to trust God to set the standard for how we are to live. We have to look and see what his standards are. We have to actually read and hear about that, but then we actually have to do it. Jesus says, look, if you follow me, you'll have peace. So why are we surprised if we don't follow him that we don't have his peace? It just makes sense. If we want what he offers, we have to follow him. I've asked before, I'll ask it again. If other people followed you, if they imitated you, would they be better or worse? Would they be closer to Jesus or farther away from Jesus? We want to set an example. We want to live in a way that people could follow us as we follow Christ. That's what Paul was able to do. That's what he wants us to do as well. Look at verse 10. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Basically, just to sum that up real quick, what he's saying is they had sent along a financial gift. Remember, he's under house arrest. He has to pay for that himself, so they sent along a gift. They wanted to do it earlier, but they couldn't. Now they're doing it, so he says, thank you. Look at verse 11. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. So yes, he's thankful for their gift, but he's also telling them even when he didn't have it, even when he was in need, he was still content. What's the definition of content? It is a state of peaceful happiness. What we often think is that we can be content if we have all the things we want or all the things we need. If I have everything I need, then I can be content. What Paul is saying is that even when he didn't have what he needed, he was able to be content. Here's our third point. We have to trust God to provide what we need. We have to trust God to provide what we actually need. Now, here's the thing. Not necessarily what we think we need, but what God really knows we need. And there is sometimes a difference. Sometimes I'm sure of what I need. And to get the results that I want, it's true, I probably do need that thing. But sometimes God says, well, those results aren't what I want for you. That direction, that outcome, that's not what I want. So even though you think you need this thing to get there, you might be right, but I don't want you to get there. I want you to go a different direction. So I'm going to give you what you need for that. That's what he's saying. We have to trust God to provide. Now this is really cool. The word provide, this comes from actually two Latin words. The word pro and video. Pro means before, video means to see. And so what that is, that's where we get our word providence. It's basically saying that God is able to see what we need before we need it. And since he can see what we need before we need it, we can trust him to provide, to give us that thing. So we trust that he will actually do that. And let's be honest, this is hard. Because sometimes what we think we need, we don't get. And in those times, that's when we have to trust God that he actually knows. That he knows what we truly do need. And we trust him to give us that. I had a car that would just randomly die. Super fun, right? I mean, it was just like every day was an adventure. You get in there, like turn the key, and hey, it worked today. Driving, and it wouldn't just like not start. Sometimes it did that too. But sometimes like while I'm driving, it would just shut off. Was not very fun, especially like when you're on the highway going like, fast. And it would do that. I'd have to pull up to the side of the road. Sometimes it was dicey. Sometimes there wasn't a side of the road to pull into. So it was always an adventure. You just never knew what the day was going to hold. So one time in particular, I had a friend who lived about an hour away. We hadn't seen each other in years, and we finally connected and got our schedules aligned that we were going to have coffee together. So I'm driving down to see him, and of course, wouldn't you know it, car dies while I'm driving. So I pull up on the side of the road. I call my buddy up. I says, hey, my car just died. I'm sorry. I won't be able to make it. Of course, he was bummed out, whatever. We'll work another time out, hopefully. And so I'm sitting in their car, and I'm thinking, like, how can I get this car to start? What I need this car to start. And then I had another idea. I thought, wait a minute, what if I just called up Megan? Megan was a friend of this person also. We were both friends with him. And so I thought, well, if I just called Megan up, maybe somehow she could work it out that she could come as well. So I called her up, and it just so happened she was visiting at her parents' house. And so she asked her parents, could I just leave the kids for a little bit? I'm going to go pick up Michael. We're going to go have coffee with our friend. I'll be back in a few hours. They said, yeah, no problem. So Megan came along, and we both got to connect with our friend. We both got to catch up. We both got to share about our lives and hear about his life. It was great. It was even better than if I had just gone. Now, I could have sat there and thought about what I needed to get the result I wanted. I needed that car to start. I could have sat there and just kept turning that key. Nothing would have happened. But I took a step back and could maybe see an alternate route that was a little bit different, but actually ended up being better. That's a small example of what can happen so many times in our life, that God knows what we really need. And sometimes we need to take that step back for him to show us another way. And sometimes it won't even be a way that we want to go, but we trust that he knows what's best. Look at verse 12. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In every circumstance, I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. Notice he says there that he knows how to be content in bad and good. Why would you need to be content in the good times? What does that even mean? Well, it's only when things are bad that we need to be content, right? Well, what he's talking about there, if we look at another example of a church in a town called Laodicea, this is in Revelation. So Jesus is talking to this church. This is known as a lukewarm church. So Jesus says, look, you're not hot. You're not like on fire following me, but you're also not cold. You're not super far away. You're just in the middle. You're okay with just mediocrity. You're okay with just doing just enough. And here's what he says in Revelation 3:17. He says, for you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing, not realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. This is a dangerous thing because we can think, well, I grew up in a Christian family, I went to youth group, I went to church my whole life, all these things. And that's enough. So we can sometimes think, I don't really need that much saving. Not like those sinners who are out there. And that is such a dangerous thought. Because you and I need just as much grace of Jesus Christ as anyone else. We all need Jesus Christ. I've often used the analogy of like trying to swim across the ocean to Europe. Some of you might be better swimmers than me. You might make it farther. None of us are going to make it on our own. We need something to get us there. None of us are going to make it to heaven on our own. We need Jesus. We all need Jesus. So no matter what you face in life, good times or bad times, if you are just focusing on your circumstances that are good and that's all you care about, you're going to miss the fact that you really need Jesus. Good and bad, we need him. So Paul says his contentment wasn't based on circumstances. regardless of his circumstances, he found contentment. Look at verse 13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. That's his secret. Here's our fourth and final point. We have to trust God to give us the strength we need to follow him. And when it says there that we can do all things through Christ, it's not saying like literally everything, like anything we want. It's like, one day I'm just going to get up and I'm not going to practice ahead of time. I'm not going to get ready for it. I'm not going to train or anything. I'm just going to go run 100 miles. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to make it very far. That's not how it works. It's not saying you can just like climb up on the roof and be like, I follow Jesus, I can therefore now fly. I can do all things through Christ. No, that's not what it's saying. This verse is taken out of context so much. The context is saying, remember, he said, I know how to be brought low. I know how to be brought high. How? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do any of that through Jesus Christ who strengthens me. The context is saying we can trust him. Notice in verse 12, too, that Paul had said he had to learn this. It takes time. The more you rely on Jesus, the more you will trust him. The more you trust him, the more you can rely on him. And more, we go further on that journey. He's saying that we can do all these things. We can face all these things with Jesus. Good, bad, everything in between. We can face it with Jesus. Paul didn't say that he found the secret to avoiding difficulty. He says he found the secret to get through it. And not just get through it okay, but to actually get through it and be content. I'm reading a book right now called Thriving in Babylon. This book, it's about the story of Daniel. And sometimes with Daniel, we sometimes mistake that the moral of the story is if you just follow God, then he'll rescue you from the furnace, he'll rescue you from the lions. Maybe. As far as I know, that only happened once. There's only one group of guys who were rescued out of a fiery furnace. There's only one guy who was rescued from the mouth of lions. The story of Daniel doesn't show us that nothing bad will ever happen. I mean, think about Daniel. His country was conquered by an enemy. He was taken away as a prisoner. He was forced to serve an evil and pagan king. That all seems pretty bad. But he didn't just survive, he was able to thrive because of his faith in God, because of his dependence on God. We can trust him. Now, trust isn't always easy. It takes time to build, and it can be broken really quickly. But God has a perfect track record of keeping his promises. Not the promises that we put on him, that we make up and say, well, God will keep this promise, right? No, the ones that he actually made. The promises he made to stick with you, to always be with you, to never leave you, never forsake you. Those promises he will keep. So we can trust him. He is literally trustworthy, worthy of trust because of this perfect track record. We can trust him as we go further on in our faith to set our standard, to set the direction. And even when things don't look the way we want them to look, we can still trust him because we know that he sees a picture much larger than the one that we see.